from the PRC, People's Republic of China, signed with South Korea and the United Nations an armistice, not a peace treaty. Well, what's the difference, Colonel? Well, a peace treaty means that everything's taken care of, you shake hands, and now you live in peace side by side. An armistice only means that you agree to stop throwing bullets at each other in large bunches. Technically, a state of war still exists between the nation of North Korea and South Korea. For example, in 1977, 7 U.S. soldiers were murdered on the demilitarized zone because they went out to chop down a tree that was blocking their observation of a portion of the demilitarized zone. And a bunch of North Korean Special Forces soldiers came out and hacked them to death with axes and hatchets and knives. Just a few years back, North Korea opened fire with artillery on an island that is owned by South Korea right near the demilitarized zone, but it's off the coast, killing several civilians. So the South Koreans responded with artillery fire. A couple months before that, the North Korean Navy sank a South Korean frigate, which is a pretty decent sized boat, killing all 46 sailors aboard. They got it with a mine. And yesterday, the North Koreans fired a ballistic missile over South Korea and into the ocean. Why? Because November 24th, November 25th are extremely significant dates in the history of the Korean War, going back to the year 1950. Ladies and gentlemen, our guests are going to tell you all about it.
I'm Sergeant Conley, served in the Army from 1949 to 1952 in Japan and Korea. One of the missions I was on, my company was set up on a mountain. My platoon leader directed me, ordered me to take my squad. I only had 5 men left out of 9. My orders were to move out in front of the company 300 yards, set up an outpost, and stay the night. On the way, we had to get through this small village. We met this old man, 2 women, 2 little boys about 2.5, 3 years old, and a girl about 10, 11 years old. Long black hair down past the waist. We gave the old man some cigarettes. Squad chipped in and gave the women some Kansas City rations. We gave the kids some little candy bars. We moved up onto the outpost, set up and stayed the night. 0600 the next morning, we moved the squad back towards the company. So we had to go through that same village. We found that old man with a wire around his neck, his hands tied behind his back. The 2 women had their throats cut. 2 little boys were sitting by their mother crying. We looked for that little girl. We couldn't find her. We spread out through the village, see if any North Koreans were still there. At the other end of the village, we saw that little girl standing by a tree. When we approached her, we noticed her feet were 6 inches off the ground, her hands tied behind her back. Some leaves that had fallen from the tree pushed into her mouth so she couldn't cry out for help. And long black hair tied around the tree branch over her head. Her head was almost twice its size from hanging in that tree all night long. We cut her down, put her with the 2 women and the old man in between the 2 little shacks they lived in, covered them with our poncho. A lot of us used to carry small American flags. I still do to this day. We laid one of the flags on top of the poncho. I had the squad cut down that tree branch, lay it on the flag so it wouldn't blow away. We picked up them 2 little boys, took them back to the chaplain. He passed them on to the orphanage. That afternoon, we saw the grave registration boys. We told them what happened in the village. We asked them to give them people a halfway decent burial. When we gave them a meal the night before, they wouldn't tell the enemy where we were. They gave their lives for 5 GIs they didn't even know that was there to save their country. From there, my unit went up to the Chosin Reservoir. 3,200 men from my unit. I'm one of 385 that made it out alive. The rest were killed, wounded, froze to death, or were taken prisoner. I took a bayonet in the neck. It was 40 below zero. That froze the bleeding, otherwise I would have bled to death. 7 years ago, I was at Williamstown High School, and I told the students the same story I just told you. A boy in the back of the room started crying. I took him out in the hall so he wouldn't be embarrassed among the other students. When I took his hands away, the boy was Korean. He said his grandfather and his uncle had told him the same story, how 5 GIs had saved their lives and buried the family. I saw that boy again last September. He graduated from high school, went to college, graduated, went back to Korea, and he says his grandfather still has that American flag in his living room, leaning up against the wall, being held by a branch of the tree that the little girl was hung from. Any questions? Thank you.
Took basic training in Camp Gordon, Georgia, and then was sent to the Army Signal School up at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, up by Asbury Park. After I finished there, I was assigned to Korea. Getting there was half the fun. Flew from New York to Seattle, Fort Lewis, Washington. Waited a few days, boarded a ship at Puget Sound, and spent 3 weeks sailing across the Pacific to Yokohama, Japan. For a while there, I thought I had joined the Navy. Upon arriving in Yokohama, we boarded a Japanese bullet train, and we're headed for the southern Japanese island and the city of, well, actually, the former Japanese naval base of Sasebo. En route, the train stopped at a town you all, I'm sure, have heard of, Hiroshima. Yeah, that Hiroshima. This was only 8 years after we had dropped a nuclear device on Hiroshima, and I had always thought that the nuclear the residual radiation would be around forever, but apparently not so. They were rebuilding. And after we finally got to Sasebo, we boarded an LST and headed from Japan up the west coast of Korea for Incheon. Now, Incheon has extremely high low tides, and the large draft ships could not dock there at that time, so we had to go over the side and down the rope ladders into landing barges like we saw in the old John Wayne movies from World War II. And that's how we landed at Incheon. Fortunately, the ceasefire had been signed while I was still finishing up at the signal school in Fort Monmouth, and no one was shooting at us when we came in at Incheon. I went to a radio company just outside of Incheon, and from there I went up to a mountain on the north side of Seoul. My job was going to be maintaining radio, telephone, and type communications between 8th Army Forward in Seoul and the frontline units along the DMZ. I have here a picture I took from the hill. In the background is South Mountain. Our platoon headquarters was on South Mountain. We had 3 hills, South Mountain, and 2 on the north side of Seoul. This was taken from where I spent 13 months on South Mountain. The war had passed back and forth across Seoul for about 4 times. There wasn't too much left of the buildings. A lot of the houses had thatched roofs. And about 2 years ago, I wondered, what does that area look like today? When I got on the computer, I almost fell off the chair. I found this. It's the same mountain in the background, but Seoul sure does look a lot different today. It looks like New York City. The South Koreans made excellent advances in the past few years. After we still have 28,000 men there. We provided them the security, and they used their ingenuity to develop they are now today the 10th largest economy in the world. They build the Hyundai car, Kia, and electronics and pharmaceuticals. Now, on top of our hill, we had a barbed wire fence around it. We only had about 12 to 15 American troops on the top of the hill and 4 or 5 South Korean troops who provided the guard duty. Inside the barbed wire, we had flares spaced out with tripwires, so that if anyone were to get through the barbed wire, they would probably brush against a tripwire and light up a flare and give away where they are. Well, this happened one night. Everyone went rushing out with their weapons, but the South Korean guard caught the guy. He apparently was there to steal something from the South Korean troops' squad tent. So we sent him over to the South Korean authorities, and we decided that, hey, our hill isn't as secure as we thought. So we decided to beef it up a little bit. Since we were a signal outfit, we had access to all sorts of electronic equipment. So we got some barbed wire and insulators and insulated another strand of wire around the top of the fence. Hooked this up to a step-up transformer, which would take the voltage coming from one of our generators and kick it way up. Hooked it up to a switch, which incidentally we installed in our outhouse. And every night we would throw the switch and electrify the fence. Sounds like a great idea, but would it really work? Well, being practical, we decided to go over to the mess hall and requisition some Link breakfast sausages and drape them over the top wire and touch it onto the other wire. Threw the switch, it blew the sausages apart, and we were never bothered again. Thanks, guys. Any questions?
I was drafted in 1954 and served in 1956. I served 18 months, 5 courses in Japan. I received basic training at Fort Dix, New Jersey for 8 weeks and 8 weeks advanced training in artillery at Camp Chaffee, Arkansas. While I was in Japan, I fired 105s and 155 howitzers. You know what a howitzer is? It's a cannon. You know what a cannon is. This is a round for a 105 howitzer. It weighs approximately 35 to 38 pounds. It consists of the warhead. It's a black tip here. The projectile is this bluish gray. This is the canister. This is the brains, you might say, of this round. It tells it what to do once it gets there. And there are several different kinds of rounds, or several different kinds of warheads. This warhead has a timing device on it. And what that does is you can set it to go off so far above the ground. And the reason for that is if there's troops in an open field, you don't want it to hit the dirt and then go off. You want it to explode above the ground so that it covers a bigger area. Okay. Now there's another warhead, it's called HEAT. That's high explosive anti-tank. And what that does, when it hits the tank, it penetrates through the armor plate. It's like a torch, it burns right through. Once it burns through, then it explodes inside. When that happens, nobody lives inside the tank. Okay? When this round goes off, the outside of this here fragments into pieces. And it looks like this. Okay. Now, this has been laying in the field for quite a long time, and it's smoothed over because of the weather beating it down. But if this was fired just recently and broke up and you run your fingers across this, we'd cut your fingers, because this fragments into pieces that are razor sharp. And when they fly through the air, they cut right through you. Okay. The powder that propels this is put inside of this canister, and it's in bags. It goes from 1 powder bag to 7 powder bags. And depending on how far this round is to go, you put so many bags in there. And the way that's determined is by what they call FDC, that's fire direction control. Now there's 2 men that sit in a tent, and they figure out how much powder goes in here and how far it's going to go and how far left or right that the gun is to be set at. Lost my train of thought. The FDC figures all that out. The guns we don't figure any of that out on the guns. Of course, we didn't have GPS back in those days. We had what they call slide rules, and I don't expect you to understand what they are, because it's ancient of a way of figure out how much powder and the range of this, where it's to go. Okay. This is a 155 round. It weighs approximately 98 pounds, and it's roughly a little over 6, right around 7 inches in diameter. It has a warhead on here exactly like that one. Does the same thing. And it has a brass ring. This yellow stripe around here is a brass ring. And what happens is, when this is jammed into the breech of the howitzer, it seals it, because there's no canister like this one. The powder is put into the breech right behind the back of the projectile. And it's jammed in there, and it's made of brass, because brass is softer than the case-hardened steel that the tube's made out of. And that seals it. And the reason it has to be sealed is because when that powder goes off, you want all the force behind it. You don't want anything escaping up past it, okay? And as it's going through the tube of the howitzer, it's turning in a spiral motion like this. That's because inside the tube, there are grooves that are in a spiral motion. There are spiral grooves inside of the tube of the howitzer, okay? So when it goes out, like I say, it turns. And it's just like a quarterback on a football team. When he throws the ball, throws it in spiral motion, and so it goes where he wants it to go. If those spiral grooves weren't in there, it would come out and it would just flip in for end. Okay. Now, when this explodes, the outer casing of this breaks up into fragments just like this, and that's called fragments. Inside of this, there are 800 little steel balls. They're a little less than a ½ inch in diameter, and they flatten out like a coin, and they fly through the air. So, now, if this round was to go off in here, everybody would be dead. nobody would survive. This round was to go off in here. Nobody would survive, and the walls would probably be knocked down. It would do a lot more damage. Any questions so far?
Got one here, Nate? Any question?
Sure, where did you get all that stuff?
This here, this is a real warhead here. I got it from, I was on the honor guard at the cemetery in Veteran Cemetery in Gloucester County, and a major came one day to fold the flag, and he was artillery, and I got talking to him, telling him that I go around to the schools, and he says, I got some stuff for you. So he gave me this, and he also gave me the shrapnel that he picked up that had been out in the field for a long time. Okay. This is a timer. I'll show you what the timer looks like real quick. There's the inside of it.
You know, that timer there, that's going to determine how far off the ground it explodes,
Yes.
right? So it's variable time fuse, is that what you're saying?
Right, the VT.
Got it, HEVT. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions?
Corporal, the other two white pieces you got there that you were holding up, you made them yourself, them two pieces?
Yeah, this here is just, this is made out of wood here, I made, and this top part here is a projectile made out of wood. And one day for Father's Day, my children found this round, the casing, and they bought it for me. On the 155 howitzer, before we fire it, we have to jack it up off the ground. Anybody know why?
So it doesn't explode on the ground where you are?
Pardon?
So it doesn't like hit the ground where you are, like explode?
No. We have to jack it up because it'll blow the tires out. That's how powerful this is. Okay. And when we load this one, it takes at least 5 men to load it. This is put on a loading tray. Now you have to figure this weighs 98 pounds. So there's one man standing here and one man standing here, and he holds it up to the open breech. And 3 other men have what they call a bell rammer. It's shaped like a bell, and then there's a long rod on it. And they stand with their back like this with the rod, with the bell up against the bottom of this round. And they ram that in to that breech just as hard as they can to seal it into. Okay.
How many rounds a minute could a good crew fire on average? Sustained fire.
You know, I really don't know. I can't answer that, but I know from firing 105 and 155s that for every 3 155 rounds, I can fire 15 of these,
Okay.
the 105s. So it's like a 15 to 3.
Now, so you understand the way technology is now, he's talking about that, the guys with loading trays. The artillery they have now, that's called self-propelled, it's like artillery on top of the tank. All that is like automated now. You literally push a button, it picks the round for you, you push another button, it loads the round into the cannon for you. And then all the stuff he's talking about, trying to figure out where to fire the round, that's all done with computers. But the stuff you were talking about with the slide rules and with the wheels and then all the maps and all that kind of stuff, they still teach you that in the military, in the Army and the Marines and the Navy, because if your electronics go out or your computers don't work, you still have to be able to do your job.
The satellite in the sky goes
Yeah,
out.
satellite in the sky goes down, and more GPS, you've got to be able to do it literally using stubby pencil and slide rules and stuff.
The Navy actually used to act as floating artillery. The battleship New Jersey that's sitting off Camden during the Korean War was sitting off Korea, and that could fire a projectile. I think it weighed the same as a Volkswagen Beetle,
Yeah.
20 miles inland.
Literal fire Volkswagens. That's what he's called.
No questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Since the ceasefire in July 27th, 1953, I'm one of 1 million plus men and women of all branches of service who served in Korea. I think it's 28,000 a year now, but it used to be higher. Anyway, I enlisted in the Air Force in 1956. I served in Texas, Wyoming, and California. On March 9th, 1959, I received orders to go to Korea. In April, I boarded a C-54 plane, a propeller-driven aircraft, Travis Air Force Base, California. And we refueled in Hawaii, refueled in Wake Island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Then we landed at Tachikawa Air Base, Japan. I had a 9-hour layover. Then I got another plane for Osan Air Base, Korea. I got there about 3 o'clock in the morning, and when daylight came, they sent me north to Kimpo Air Force Base, which was near the, it was an important base because it was near the capital of Seoul. When I got off the bus, first thing they said, be alert, we're within artillery range of North Korea. That was nice to hear. Anyway, my job was supply. We used to order everything from toilet paper to aircraft parts, everything to keep the base operational. We had 6 F-105 Starfighter jet planes. Once they were airborne, they could hit North Korea in a couple of minutes. So in July of 59, the engineers came next to my supply building. They started digging a very large hole, and then they came in with a 50-foot trailer bed. They lowered it in the hole, covered it over with dirt and sandbags, and they said, "This is your bomb shelter." Because things were heating up in the communist world. Cuba just went communist, and they were only 90 miles off the Florida coast. North Vietnam invaded their neighbor Laos. So I guess they thought maybe North Korea would attack us, but it never happened. Time went by pretty fast. Next thing I know, it's April of 1960. That's when the people of South Korea were tired of their president, Sigma Rhee. And there were riots in the streets, and people were getting killed. Our base was on lockdown for 2 weeks. And after that cleared, they gave me R&R, and I could never figure, you know what R&R is? Rest and recuperation. I could never understand why they gave me R&R. I wasn't in combat, but they gave me 7 days in Tokyo, which was nice. Anyway, I came back from Tokyo. First week of June 1960, I'm on my way home. So as we're approaching the Hawaiian Islands, the captain said, "Look down there to your left, you'll see a troop ship heading for Korea." My brother was drafted in the Army, and he was on that ship with the 7th Division. He's heading over, and I'm coming home. I get discharged at Travis Air Force Base on June the 9th. I come back to Clement, New Jersey, where I enlisted from. After a few months at home, I joined the 93 17th Air Reserve Squadron in Haddonfield, a ready reserve unit. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, of 1962, we were alerted but never activated. So I stayed another year. I didn't want to leave the Air Force, but our unit got transferred to Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. And I just didn't feel like driving that far. So I left the Air Force. So from 56 to 63, I was in the Air Force. Thanks a lot.
Cool. Hoo-wah.
Is this going to be on camera?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I better not do what I usually do.
Raider Challenge training, right? There you go, rucksacks.
Don't hold the pen. Just got this to get away. The uniform I'm wearing is the same uniform I made the entering landing with. Everything the infantry soldier owns when he's in combat is carried in his backpack. Extra socks, underwear, set of fatigues, his mess kit, shaving kit, his chow, sea rations. In the bottom he carries his field jacket, his trenching shovel to dig a foxhole, his bedroll. We only got a blanket up on the front line. They didn't give us a sleeping bag. They were afraid we'd go to sleep. Each one of these pouches holds a clip of ammunition for the M1 rifle. It's got a first aid kit, compass, canteen. Under the canteen, he's got a cup. 9.5 pound rifle, the helmet, couple of grenades, couple of bandoliers of ammunition. When he's attacking the enemy up the hill or across the field, always felt like he was falling backwards, because this weighed between 65 and 85 pounds. The helmet comes in two parts. When you're on the front line, you wear both parts. You go back to the rear, you can take this off, throw a little water in there, wash up, heat up your sea rations. It's also your porta potty on the front lines. There's no bathrooms up there. You get out of that foxhole, look for a bathroom, you're gonna take one right between the eyes, because that's what the enemy's looking for. Movement out there, somebody get out of that foxhole. You use this, throw it, make sure you don't, that nobody's back there with a rifle. You wash it out, you put it right back on again. I used it, I washed it, now she's got it.
I didn't want to have that one.
That's all right.
We always do that.
We were up on the front lines, and the sergeant used to come around every night at sundown, check on his men. There's supposed to be 2 men in a foxhole. One can sleep, the other guy's got to stay on guard duty. He found both men sleeping in a foxhole. He gave them each a hand grenade, took the pin, said, "I'll see you in the morning." I was in the next foxhole with the next guy. The next foxhole over here, there was 2 more men. When that sergeant came back the next morning, none of us had slept that night. All 6 of us stayed awake all night. The 2 guys were sitting in a foxhole shaking, waiting for the sergeant to come back with that pin. You don't go to sleep when you're on guard duty. If they had a fellow sleep with that handle went up, all of them would have been gone. So would the 2 in foxhole. Any questions? Ray, how did you go in service? How did you get in service?
I was drafted at age 20.
What did you do when you come out?
I used the GI Bill to go to Penn. While I was in college, I worked full-time at night as a police reporter with the Philadelphia Daily News. and I stayed with the news for 38 years.
Wow.
I got out, I went to work for New York City Transit Police, 38 years. I lived in New York. My neighbor was John Gotti. Anybody know who John Gotti is?
Yeah, I know who John Gotti is.
He's the mob man from New York.
The Teflon Don.
That's Ron Don.
Yeah, there you go.
Where'd you,
I enlisted in the Air Force at age 19, and when I got out of the service, I was a Clement police officer and also a court officer in the county of Camden, 33 years.
Bill?
I worked for a DuPont company for 2 years before I was drafted, and then when I came back, they gave me my job back again. And while I was there, I worked on the Manhattan Project. Anyone know what the Manhattan Project is?
I think, I don't know. I know what it is, I just can't explain it. It's like
John, you raised your hand too. Delangelo, what's the Manhattan Project?
the development of the nuclear bomb.
That's
The
right.
atomic bomb.
The atomic bomb, that's right. It was made different parts of it was made all over, and the DuPont company made part of it. Of course, I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know what I was working with. Found out later. Of course, it was like 15 years after they used it, I found out.
Any other questions?
Not a question, sir, but I need you three gentlemen, if you would, please come on up. So I have a small presentation to make to you. Ladies and gentlemen, something that we started last year was the tradition of the battalion coin. The battalion coin has the Delsea JROTC patch on one side and the JROTC patch on the other that we used to have on our green uniforms. We give these out to guests who come and talk to us, tell us about their experiences. Gentlemen, on behalf of all of us in the Cadet Corps and myself and Sergeant Merritt, please accept this battalion coin as a token of our appreciation.
Thank you.
There you go, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, you are quite welcome.
You went to Air Force? Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you.